I used to think loyalty was the reward for being easy to love. Turns out it's just another word for not checking the evidence. Most mornings in our house start the same: the kettle clicking on, the sound of him shaving, me burning the first batch of pancakes like always. He jokes that I do it on purpose. I tell him it's our ritual, one ruined pancake for luck. He laughs, kisses my forehead, leaves his jacket draped over the same chair he's left it on for 15 years. We don't say I love you much anymore. It's tucked into smaller things: him refilling my coffee when he thinks I'm not looking, me keeping his shirts pressed even when I'm angry. Comfort disguised as routine. I'm not the dramatic type. I don't snoop, I don't question, I don't assume the worst. I keep order, bills paid, house quiet, life in motion. That's what I'm good at. Tidying the edges so the middle looks calm. And for a long time, I believed calm meant safe. That if nothing was broken, we were fine. But safety isn't the same as honesty. I just didn't know that yet. The first lie wasn't big. It was the kind of thing you almost want to believe. It started on a Thursday, the day I finally decided to clean out the jacket he never let me take to the dry cleaners. The pockets were full of small domestic archaeology: loose change, gum wrappers, an old conference badge, and a folded receipt from a perfume shop in Manchester. He was supposed to have been in Leeds that week. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not angry, not even suspicious. Just curious in that quiet, uncomfortable way that makes you wish you hadn't looked at all. The perfume had a woman's name on the label. Clara. Clara. Short. Soft. A name that sounds like it belongs to someone who doesn't have to explain herself. When he came home, I slipped the receipt onto the counter with the rest of the mail. He saw it immediately. Didn't flinch. "Client gift," he said easily. "You know how that goes." And I did know. Or I thought I did. Business. Clients. Thank you tokens. Ordinary life. I nodded. I even smiled. That's the thing about small lies. They work because you want them to. Later, when I went to park his car, his phone screen lit up through the dashboard. Just a preview of a text. "Clara. Landed safe. Miss you already." The world didn't spin. It just tilted. I sat there, staring at that glowing name until the light dimmed and the car went dark again. He said it was a client dinner. I believed him. Then I saw her name again. We've been together for 15 years, long enough to share a language built on half sentences and small glances, long enough to forget where one person's habits end and the other's begin. Our life used to feel easy in the kind of way that only happens when you stop keeping score. He'd make coffee too strong, I'd make it too weak. He'd drive too fast, I'd remind him we weren't late. We were a balance of flaws that somehow made sense. Fridays were grocery nights. He'd push the trolley, sneak in things we didn't need, extra biscuits, expensive cheese, and I'd roll my eyes and let him. We'd joke about how we'd both forget the milk again. It was stupid, ordinary, and perfect in the way quiet lives are perfect. Not because they're exciting, but because they're safe. Then came the promotion. He was proud. I was proud of him too. It meant better money, bigger projects, real travel. "You deserve this," I told him. "We'll manage." At first it felt like a good kind of busy: airport texts, little souvenirs, photos of hotel breakfasts. But then the spaces between the trips got smaller, and the silence between us grew longer. He started packing faster, more efficiently. One shirt less. No hesitation. The suitcase lived half open in the corner of our bedroom, like another guest neither of us wanted to acknowledge. When he called from hotels, his voice would be soft, tired, polite. "Long day," he'd say. "You okay?" And I'd always say yes. Because I was supposed to be the steady one, the woman who understood, the partner who didn't make things harder. He worked hard. I just forgot how to. Sometimes I'd wake up to an empty half of the bed, the pillow still cold, and tell myself this was what commitment looked like. Two people running in parallel, occasionally glancing sideways to make sure the other was still there. I didn't notice when the laughter turned into silence, or when his touch became absent-minded. I only knew that it was happening too quietly for me to call it a problem. I wasn't angry yet, just lonely in a way that felt like my fault. I told myself that's what love was. Patience. Later, I'd learned patience looks a lot like denial. The signs didn't arrive all at once. They trickled in, like a leaking tap you tell yourself you'll fix later. A hotel charge from a city that wasn't on his itinerary. A calendar reminder on his phone titled Clara, Thursday, 7 p.m. A call that hung up the second I answered. Each time he had an answer ready. Calm. Reasonable. Practiced. Last-minute meeting change. Client, follow-up dinner? Wrong number. You know how spam calls are these days? He never raised his voice. He never looked nervous. He just smiled, brushed my cheek with his thumb, and told me not to worry. And I didn't. At least, not right away. I wanted to believe him more than I wanted the truth. The mind does strange things when it's desperate to stay safe. I started diagnosing myself instead of him. Maybe it's me, I told myself. Maybe it's hormones. Maybe I just missed the version of us that didn't need proof. So I kept cleaning, kept cooking, kept showing up to a life that was quietly unrecognizable. Then he started being affectionate again, overly so. Texts in the middle of the day, kisses on the forehead, flowers for no reason. It should have felt good, but it didn't. It felt like guilt disguised as devotion. He started hugging me like he was apologizing for something I didn't know yet. I'd stand there in his arms, stiff, aware of how rehearsed it felt, like he was trying to convince himself he was still a good man. At night, I'd lie awake, listening to him breathe beside me, wondering which part of his life I belonged to, the one he lived at home, or the one he lived somewhere else. I stopped asking questions. Questions gave him chances to lie. Instead, I started watching. Not for revenge, not even for closure, just for the truth, however ugly it turned out to be. If I'm going to lose him, I whispered to the dark, I at least want to know to who. The proof came quietly, like everything else. No drama, no discovery music, just a notification. His tablet lit up on the counter one afternoon while I was sorting laundry. He never left it unlocked, but this time it was. I told myself I was just moving it, but curiosity is a kind of hunger once you've been starving for truth. There was a folder in his cloud drive labeled invoices. I opened it. Inside were hotel receipts, travel documents, and photos, landscapes, dinner tables, hotel lobbies, and then the same woman from the perfume label, Clara, sitting across from him at a restaurant, wine glasses half full. Another picture, blurry, of her smiling while holding his jacket. One with his reflection in the window behind her. No intimacy, no kiss, but familiarity, comfort. My chest tightened in that small, precise way grief sneaks in before your mind catches up. When he came home that evening, I waited until after dinner. We were washing dishes when I said, calm and simple. "Who's Clara?" He paused, then smiled. Not like a guilty man, like a teacher explaining something to a child. "You always do this. You think the worst of me." I told him about the photos. He didn't flinch. "She's a client," he said. "We had dinner. That's it." I asked why he had so many pictures, why her name kept showing up, why her message said, "Miss you already." He sighed, soft and disappointed. "You've been so anxious lately," he said. "Maybe it's stress, maybe it's everything going on with you. With me." He turned it around so smoothly I almost thanked him for the manipulation. He brushed my shoulder, told me to get some rest, said he loved me, then he kissed my forehead like a benediction and walked away. I stayed in the kitchen long after the lights were off, the dishwasher humming like a heartbeat I couldn't calm down. He didn't deny it. He just made me feel stupid for asking. That was the first time I realized the truth might not hurt as much as being treated like I was crazy for seeing it. He wasn't just lying anymore. He was rewriting the story. And part of me was already starting to believe his version. The next trip came sooner than I expected. He said it the way someone might mention picking up milk. Casual, rehearsed, practiced. Client meeting out of town. Back Friday. I smiled, nodded, folded his shirts. My hands were steady even when my heart wasn't. When he pulled out of the driveway, I waited 5 minutes before starting the car. I kept a safe distance, headlights off on the open stretch. He didn't look back once. He didn't drive toward the motorway. He turned south through smaller roads, quieter streets, towns without office buildings or hotels. After 2 hours, he slowed, turned onto a narrow lane lined with tall birch trees, and stopped outside a small white house. No business district, no clients, just a home that looked like it hadn't heard laughter in a while. A woman answered the door. Not young, not glamorous. The opposite of what I'd imagined. Her cardigan hung loose on thin shoulders. Her hair was pulled back in a way that said practicality, not vanity. They didn't kiss. They didn't even stand close. He handed her a bag of groceries, smiled faintly, and she smiled back. The kind of smile that knows someone. He followed her inside. The door closed. The lights came on. I sat across the street, car idling, rain starting to fall, watching the windows flicker with movement. They were talking, maybe laughing, maybe crying. I couldn't tell. The longer I watched, the less I understood. It wasn't the kind of affair I imagined. It was something gentler, and somehow that hurt worse. I'd been ready for betrayal, for heat, for proof. But tenderness, that was harder to forgive. I stayed there for hours, waiting for something clear, a kiss, an argument, a reason to hate him properly. Nothing came, just two shadows moving through the kitchen, then the lights went out. If he was cheating, I could leave. But what do you do when you can't even name what's wrong? When he came home the next day, I didn't ask where he'd been. I wasn't ready for another lie. Not until I knew what kind of truth it was hiding. He came home from that trip quieter than usual. He didn't even pretend to tell me how it went. He just placed his suitcase by the door and sat down like a man who'd forgotten what rest felt like. His hands were trembling slightly. I asked if he was okay. He said he was just tired. Tired from the drive, the meetings, the endless cycle of everything. I made tea. He didn't drink it. Later that night, I heard the thud, a sound so heavy it silenced the house. He was on the floor, one hand gripping his chest, the other trying to wave me off. I called for help. My voice sounded calm, detached, like it belonged to someone else. The doctor said it was dehydration and exhaustion. He needs rest, they said. He's been overdoing it. They didn't know half of it. While he slept in the hospital, I went through his things, telling myself I was gathering clothes for his discharge. What I was really gathering were answers. I found the folder in his desk drawer, her name written neatly in the corner, Clara. Inside were hospital bills, appointment slips, test results, chemotherapy, radiation, end-of-life care, dates matching every one of his business trips. And suddenly, the pieces rearranged themselves. Clara wasn't a mistress. She was his ex-wife, the woman he'd left years before we met, the one he never spoke about except once, a story about a mistake that ended before it ruined everything. It hadn't ended. Not for him. He'd been paying for her treatments, driving her to appointments, sitting beside her through every infusion. Not out of love, maybe, but guilt. Or maybe both. Some tangled version of devotion that didn't fit neatly into right or wrong. I sat on the floor surrounded by the evidence, feeling everything at once. Rage, sorrow, pity, shame. I could forgive an affair easier than a lie told for love. He wasn't unfaithful in body, but in spirit, in truth. He'd left me months ago. He was faithful to his past and faithless to our present. That was the real betrayal. Not who he saw, but what he kept from me. Because when you lie to protect someone, you still leave them in the dark. You just call it kindness. He left early the next morning before the sun even touched the windows. No suitcase this time, just his keys and that same worn jacket. He didn't tell me where he was going, but I knew. I watched him from the kitchen window, that familiar gait. Steady, deliberate, tired. He looked like a man walking toward something heavy and necessary. Part of me wanted to stop him. Another part wanted to let him go. An hour later, I followed. Not because I didn't trust him anymore, but because I still did. In some twisted way. I needed to see it for myself, to decide if I could live with the version of him that still loved someone else in secret. The sky was the kind of gray that makes everything look washed out. Rain gathered on the windshield, wipers beating time against my heartbeat. Then, Up ahead, brake lights, a police barrier, a crowd. The road was blocked. Blue lights flashed against the wet tarmac. A car crumpled into the barrier. I didn't need to see the license plate. I already knew. It wasn't cinematic. There was no shouting, no running toward him. Just a stillness that stretched too wide for sound to fill. Paramedics moved with quiet urgency, but their faces said enough. I stood at the edge of the scene, soaked and hollow, watching his world end without ceremony. Later, at the funeral, people spoke softly about him, about his kindness, his loyalty, his big heart. No one mentioned the secrets. No one mentioned the woman dying quietly in another town. I didn't correct them. I didn't join in either. He died trying to make peace with her, and now I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make peace with that. Sometimes love survives the lie, but the people don't. After everyone left, I sat alone in the car, listening to the rain hit the roof. No music, no crying, just breath and weather and the sound of something that used to be alive, cooling into silence.